about to leave, already packing, come with me, I'm not really asking.
To start this afternoon, we have a group presentation, part of the Homeboat group, and they'll explain to you what Homeboat is. My own kind of intro starts with first having met Jack Forinash and Mary Welcome when I was with another group of students on a field trip up in Winona, Minnesota, a couple years ago at Outpost, which is a place that was run by, or is run by, Art of the Rural. And in fact, so Ashley Hanson had just recently exhibited work up there at Outpost as well. So if anybody wants to go connect with them, that's a good one. So I met those guys, and then we had a summer course last year, which some of you in the audience had participated in, called Rural and Proud, and that was at Epicenter, and for the most part, Jack and Mary were there. Well, Mary had to leave, and we worked with Jack, and we did a mix of projects in a rural community called in Green River, Utah. This year, if you want to sign up, still want to register, we're actually going to New Kuyama. The Blue Sky, we're working with the Blue Sky Center where Jack is now located. And I think, Mary, will you be there in the summer at all?
I might overlap.
Might overlap again a little bit, just by one day and then take off again.
We have some sexy pictures of New Kuyama in the presentation. We'll be sure to call out. So
Okay, right. Register now, the little button.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we thought it'd be great to have Jack also come participate in the de-innovation. That conversation led to, again, like, let's extend this workshop. What are the kinds of projects that we can do to also involve students more? And so they've just spent the week down with Corbin LaMont from the Office of Virtue and the Changing Times newspaper down at Westbrook Artist Site, working with me. And again, a lot of you guys that were also in the audience came down and joined us. So their roles are varied, but I would say they're, again, highly interdisciplinary, always changing, a lot of, again, transformative social design, really engaging with people in interesting ways for their projects. So we'll see what happens.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, would you like me to start things off? Okay, so we're Homeboat, if you didn't understand that yet. We're a collective. Today we have Jack, myself, Corbin, and Mary. Some other friends that we also collaborate with are Kelly Gregory, an amazing architect. Spencer Cole was out with us this week in Winterset, so if you came out to the studios, you might remember Spence. He unfortunately went back to his dog and his husband in Portland, whatever. And then Nick Nurburn, who's a photographer. And then we also collaborate with so many other people, including Ashley, you guys collaborated with in the fall. So Homeboat takes many shapes and forms, but it's a way for us to bring our friends onto teams that we're excited about working on. So Jack's gonna give you a little bit intro into his path. I'll do mine, Mary will do hers, and then we're gonna break it down for you after that as well. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a nice quote for you to start.
So I think, yeah, we'll start with this quote. What the part here that is interesting is that I'm from Alabama, so it mentions the American South, and I moved after Alabama after graduating to Utah, to the American West. But this quote by Samuel Mockbee, who is one of the founders of Rural Studio, a program in West Alabama, the part that has always kind of resonated with me is that last part there, that how to avoid becoming done by the power of modern technology and economic affluence, that I lose focus on the fact that people and place matter. It's really about the place, the specific nature of those places, the weather, the people, the culture, and I think really what resonated with me is this idea that we're all kind kind of being led to do the wrong thing, or led to what I see as the wrong thing. And that's becoming a house pet to the rich. And we need to get out of that role. Here's a house that I built in Masons Bend, Alabama with the Rural Studio program. This is in the second year of school. It's a 5-year program at Auburn. And I went into architecture because I liked the word, the shape of the word, and the sounds of the word. That's basically how I made my decision to choose architecture. That, and it really narrowed down that, like, they probably don't have this anymore. There used to be this 3-inch book that had like only a half a page per college, and you had to like choose where you're going to go to college, and it said like how many people went there, what the costs were, and what the programs were. And by choosing architecture, suddenly I only had to look at like 1/8 of the inch of the book. And then I was from Alabama, as I mentioned, and Auburn was in Alabama, and so it was kind of an easy fit. And I went into school, and Auburn, they don't. They had a rule, I think they got rid of it, unfortunately, but you don't have computers the first year, and you have to draw and you have to make. And I was like, okay, I can do this. I can sit with glue and glue 2 pieces of basswood together and like wait for 5 minutes until it glues together. I can make craft. I can do craft. So I eventually got good at that, and so I got an A for the second semester. And then I applied to go out to Rural Studio, and we went out there and we started meeting clients and living in this town of a couple hundred people.
What's Rural Studio?
Well, I'm telling you.
Okay.
So Rural Studio is the program that I applied to and went out. About half the students get to go, and it's in West Alabama. And you move from Auburn in East Alabama to West Alabama, about 3 hours away, and you live out there. And it's an area of the country known as the Black Belt. It's both because of the soil that used to be there when cotton was king. That's all now washed away down to New Orleans. And because of, right now, the left behind population there, it's about 90% black people and 10% white. So it's Auburn is a public school. It kind of sounds Ivy League, so I like to let that fly when anybody ever thinks that, but it's actually just a public school. It's mostly middle class, suburban, white students that go to that school, which I am one of those. And so going out to West Alabama, it was even closer to my house than Auburn was. I realized that there was another part of the state and there was another part of the country, and that people were living in vibrant places that I just had no idea existed. So we built this weird house that you can see there. Is there another picture of it? Is that the only one?
I think so.
There it is again. And so I thought, oh, this is what architecture is. It's designing and building. Got this. And so I was really excited about architecture. Then I went back to school, back to Auburn, and we had to design a museum on a fake site for a fake client with no budget, and you didn't have to think about how it was built, and you could even make up what the museum was about. And I got a D, and I said, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. And so I heard about this class that was going to be working with Habitat for Humanity, and they're going to design and build, and it was invite only, and I was not on the invite list. So I went to the class anyway, and the teacher read the roll, and he's like, anybody didn't call? And I was like, it's me. And he's like, what's your name? And so I told him, and then he's like, well, you're not on this list. I was like, oh no, I'm supposed to be on that list. He said, okay, and he like wrote it down. So we ended up designing and building this house. It's a modular, 2 components there. The white component and the wood-sided component are modular units. In the interior, the middle component is built on site. It's a way for rural affiliates to be able to build habitat houses. A lot of times you can raise the money, obviously you can find the need, the clients are there, but it's hard to have enough people out there to build every day. And so houses take years to build at times. So this was a way to get all the specialized trades, the electrical, the plumbing, the structure all done in a factory, and efficiencies that exist within a factory, and the low waste that exists in a factory, but still provide that on-site component, the community building that Habitat is known for and is a very important part of the project. So after school, built another one of those houses, a different version of it. Obviously, my interest was in housing, and specifically appropriately sized homes. So I moved to Utah through the program called AmeriCorps Vista. Easy way to talk about it is a domestic version of the Peace Corps. You can sign up for it, and in fact, Blue Sky has 4 positions open right now. Apply. It was a flashing. Moved out to Utah, and I'd never been to Utah. Actually, there's a city called Utah next to where that last house was, EUTAW. So I kept telling people I'm moving to Utah, and they'd all be like, oh, okay, why? And it's because they just thought it was 10 minutes away. So it was Utah the state, is how I talked about it. So I worked out in Utah and quickly realized that this town of only 1,000 people called Green River, where some of y'all have visited, it's on the Green River, as you might suspect. It's on I-70, and it's on Highway 6, which also goes through Iowa. So you can drive there on one road the whole way there. This is what it looks like. And this is the summer, a couple summers in, recruited like-minded people to come out and work on some projects. So we started this program, what became known as Epicenter, and that is a community development organization still based in Green River that I worked for, founded and worked for 9 years. And for me, it was an alternative model of professional practice. I'd been an intern architect, but that wasn't where I wanted to be, and also cities to me weren't so interesting, and I felt like cities were going to be okay with all the people that would just inherently go to cities. So what was more important to me was the issues surrounding housing, and creating a new model of being able to practice architecture, but not within the confines, really the confines of urban places and of traditional firms that, as we know, are working, as we know from the quote earlier, are working as house pets to the rich, in my opinion. I know everyone does some little projects, but in general, it's easy to say that only 10% of the population, that's a very high number, is gaining access to architects. There's even this program, I forgot what it's called, like 1% or something. And it's like encouraging firms to donate 1% of their time towards a worthwhile cause. That's just ridiculous to me. That's even hard for them to get firms to do. So Green River for me became a place where I could try out and test an idea of a different form of professional practice, one that was about people and place, one that mattered to people, and really a place where I learned really quickly that I didn't advertise myself as an architect, obviously because I'm not licensed still today, because the profession doesn't value what I do, which I also have a gripe with, but also because what I learned pretty quickly is that it was more important to be a neighbor and to be the next door neighbor of these people that I was living with and interacting with every day. You saw the same people at the post office and at the chow hound and at the grocery store. You got to know these people in a lot different ways. There's this thing that happens to me sometimes, and I'm sure to y'all, where you're like, you see someone out in public, you're like, I know that person. Where do I know that person from? But you can't figure it out. And then a couple weeks later, you see that person, and they're the checkout person at the grocery store. Like, you've gone to them so many times that you can recognize them out in public, and you think that you know them. They're like, oh, they must be one of my friends or something. But actually, it's just the checkout person. You still don't even know their name. That's just not possible in small towns. And I think that it's actually allowing everyone to have more layers be visible and be expressed by working and living in small places. And I know that small towns can also become, corners of a city or a block of a city. So there's different ways to talk about small towns, but the Green River as a small town is my version of it that I think worked best. So there, I think what we were talking about earlier, my comment earlier was about not presupposing what a solution is. And so what we found through doing some projects, including a home repair program, and we designed and built a habitat house, was that we needed to know more about what was happening. And what a lot of the work became, and a lot of the work is, once you actually get to it, someone's talking about that only 20% of the time their a photographer's actually taking pictures. I did the math one time, and this was when we were building a house. Only 11% of my time was architecture, in what I was taught in school. So this is an example of a mobile home survey where we went door to door and figured out what it costs to live in a mobile home, what the needs are. If they had $100, what would they spend it on first to fix? If they had, a $100 grant to fix something, we, turned that into information that it can be both understood in a narrative form and in graphic form to try to communicate these things across the community, to the mayor, to funders. This is how you get funding for people when you're depending on our crazy system of rich people giving you money and getting tax breaks for it. This is what you have to do if you're working in the nonprofit world. But we figured out that $570 per month is what people were spending to live in a mobile home. And that 2/3 of the homes in Green River were built before there was a national building code. So what we worked on, and Spence was the lead designer of this project, and Kelly was the lead builder, and I was the behind the scenes making it all work out. We designed and built this house called the Frontier House. It used a lot of systems that are durable, thinking of sustainability with a lowercase s, about how long it lasts. This is our work site each day, so it wasn't half bad. There's Spence working on the framing, and just a couple interior shots. So this house is sized at the size of as a single wide trailer. It's priced to only cost $570 per month, including your utilities, but instead of paying towards rent, which you never recoup, and towards a mobile home, which is treated as a vehicle by the state, in the sense that your car depreciates over time, so do mobile homes. This instead is built on a permanent foundation, a regular stick-built house, so in the mortgage you earn equity and you earn ownership. And just thinking too about what it means to be a resident of a place. When you ask, when you first meet someone, one of your first questions is where are you from? And where are you from flashes in your mind. Y'all all think about where you're from right now. It's maybe a city name, you may be focusing in on your apartment or your house. It's all tied to the identity of the place, the address, the actual address, what you fill out on a form. And I've filled out a lot of forms and worked with a lot of social service programs. If you can't fill out at the top of the page, it's your name and then it's your address. If you can't fill out address, you can't go any further. You can't get any services. So anyway, that was a little bit of a side talk. But here's the house, and the people that were out there last summer helped paint it. Thank you very much. So we thought of this project as a way to migrate people from living in trailers, which depreciate and which have such instability inherent to them, where someone could just buy the mobile home mobile home lot business and just say you have 30 days to leave. And you can't always just pull the trailer to another place. And of course, there's a lot of cost to doing that too. So we developed this model as a way to systemically address the problem, not just fixing holes in roofs and walls, not just getting wheelchair ramps up to mobile homes, but trying to prove that with local materials and local contractors and with local talent, you can build a house and it can actually earn equity for you. And wealth, we think about wealth, think a lot of the dollars and what's in your bank account, but wealth is also about your stability. Having a house allows you to be able to borrow against it should you get sick or should something happen. It allows you to borrow against it to start a business. It allows you to borrow against it to go to college. If you don't have wealth in the sense of assets and money and a network that when your child's sick, that you have someone to go take them to so that you can still go to work, that's also a part of wealth. If you don't have that network and you don't have that stability, then you're starting off chopped at your knees every single day trying to do trying to live, trying to get by. Here's just another picture. Again, not a bad work site. Oh, there's more. Okay. All right. And now I've looked at all that work and thought about it and thought about what it means and trying to see, like, well, Green River, nothing is resolved in Green River. There's no solutions that have been, there's been a lot of like incremental steps and a lot of things and a lot of like progress. Of course, it's not like it's done, but I saw my role in going and talking to other places and coming to things like this and seeing other towns working in Winterset, for example, of like, oh, things aren't so dissimilar in other places. Now, I always like make sure to say, like, don't ever talk about like rural America. Like, just please stop saying that, because no one ever says, oh, I've been to LA, New York must be the same. No one's ever said that. So anytime you talk about rural America as if it's this homogenized one thing that exists everywhere, it's really hurtful. So I think, and also really what's important is to spend time in these places. Duration is like one of my number one key terms. So this is
a photo of New Cuyama, right?
This is New Cuyama, California, population 517, 973 in Green River was too big for me. Here's some crazy things that can happen in California. People from LA pay $100 a night to stay in those little huts. I can get y'all a 50% discount if you come out. There's this like experimental architecture that happened in the 60s, looking at refugees, like housing refugees. It's now like they call it a cantina. Oh, that's it. Corbin just whispered. Anyway, this is where I work now. It's a whole new world. California's very weird. You got to come see it. Apply, register. All right, I'll pass it off to Corbin.
Thank you, Jack. I'm Corbin LaMont. My education journey started here. I grew up in Oregon, but then I went out to Montana to study creative writing. Turns out that although I really like the writing component, I'm not a great reader. I had a radio show at the time in the middle of the night that nobody listened to, and I was spending all day designing things for this radio show. So I quickly realized that I probably shouldn't do creative writing, and I should probably do graphic design. But I didn't think that Missoula, Montana was the best place to study graphic design. I'm like, where am I going to intern? Who am I going to work for? So I end up at this little orange building filled with asbestos at Portland State. It's an urban campus right in the middle of the city. I say about going to PSU, it's much more like you are a person who lives in Portland that happens to go to school than you're like a person that goes to PSU. And that was really, really great for me. I met incredible people working in the industry. I got to throw design events. I had incredible educators, one who painted this building orange. Kate Bingham-Burt is obsessed with color and vibration, and she made sure that this drab building at least was bright on the outside. I graduated from graphic design at Portland State, and I ended up at my dream job. I thought it would take me 10 years to get to this building. This is Wieden & Kennedy, which is the largest independent advertising agency in the world. Their headquarters are in Portland. And so all of a sudden, I'm 21, and I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm working 60 plus hours a week, doing things like Travel Portland campaign, which was really fun. I love tourism, I love illustration. I colored in all these illustrations. Someone else drew them, and I spent many, many hours coloring them all. But then there were things that were kind of confusing about my job as a studio designer in advertising, where I was like slapping this Shop Small logo on like little entry carpets. You've probably seen them on balloons, and it was for, the client was American Express. And I was like, this feels really weird that we're making 50,000 rugs that say Shop Small, but the client is American Express. So there was like this place where my instincts were not aligned with the work that I was doing. Facebook was a client of mine at the time as well, and I'm like making ads about human connection, yet it's for Facebook. So I end up at this building, which is Jerry Rice on the Nike campus. So I'm like, okay, I don't think advertising is quite right. I don't like slapping logos on stuff. I don't really want to make short films, which are basically what ads are. I want to do branded experiences. And Nike is the biggest fish, so I'm like, okay, great. So I become a brand designer for global Nike women. And we'll get more into my work there later in the presentation. This is more of a quick intro. I spend about a year there until, again, the morals of like the work I'm making and where it's going just don't seem to be quite aligned. And at that point, I end up in my little studio. It was under a bridge. We talked a lot about unsheltered people today. I was in communication with lots of unsheltered people living under this bridge. I called this the Office of Virtue. I got to work with clients that were independent. Again, I'll show more of that work later. I'm going really quick. My day was like this, a lot lonelier than working in those big offices and those big buildings, but still I got to like put whatever I wanted on the window and make whatever I wanted. And now I have this little van and this little dog who's here today. And I took my studio on the road. I realized in Portland I was tied into this house and this studio and a certain level of client. After working for Nike, I was really well qualified to go work for Adidas, so I was doing a lot of Adidas work. And I'm like, okay, if I stay in Portland, I'm gonna keep doing sportswear work. And like, I know that that's not really what I'm into. So I started a newspaper. And I converted my van into this little living space so that I could go out on the road and do what I wanted, look at little papers, and make, it's less blood out in here, the Changing Times. So the cover of this newspaper, it'll be its sixth issue that I'm researching now. It says, "Did you know we were all connected?" So I'm going to a different place every month. I'm getting contributors, 3 to 8 contributors per issue. These are people with architecture or design or finance backgrounds, or, it's not all artists and it's not all designers. It's certainly a mix. And I'm trying to tell stories of how we're all connected. I'm still running my design studio and telecommuting with my clients from that little van or different places in between. But I haven't worked on a single Adidas project this year, and that feels great. And instead I have all these newspapers to show for it. This is New Kuyama. Technically this is Kuyama right outside of New Kuyama, but you'll learn that once you get there. I made the 3rd issue of the newspaper from New Kuyama in conjunction with Blue Sky Center. Telling stories, that issue is about water mostly. There's also, I met a guy who has a collection of 40,000 fruit crate labels, so I went to his little shed and scanned his fruit crate labels there and there. The basin in New Kuyama is one of the 10 most overdrafted critical basins in the state. So the USGS says that they have 50 years left of water if they continue to extract at the rate they're extracting now. So we left this newspaper on every doorstep of every resident in New Kuyama, 230 some doorsteps, to try to start a conversation. Try to connect people to their place, to each other, and show that we all have things that we're connected to. So right now I travel around, I mail a lot of stuff, and I never know who I'm going to meet, but I'm always surprised and happy about it.
All right. Hi guys, I'm Mary, welcome, and I'm an artist. What's that? Nobody knows. And I use the term very elastically. I really like to stretch the word to suit whatever kind of projects that I want to work on. So it's going to take me a few slides to get on a roll. This is where I live. It's right on the border of Washington and Idaho. It's a small town called Palouse. There are 997 other people that live there. I stayed there after my car caught on fire. That's a longer story for another day. But I live there on purpose now, and I've been there for the past 12 years. This is what it looks like there. Sometimes it's really cold. That's most of downtown. Sometimes it's warm. That's me when I moved there, back before I wore shoes. These are some kinds of things I like to do when I'm at home. These are some of my friends doing those things with me. This is one of my favorite places to hang out. It's the grain elevator in town. It's an agricultural community. Not soybeans, that's here. It's garbanzo beans, grain, lentils, lentil capital of the world. Most of the world's lentils come from my region. It's really cool. And there's also 2 universities within about 30 minutes, so we also have a lot of professors that don't want to live in the college town, choose to live in this town. There's also an engineering factory, so we have a lot of engineering laborers that live in this town, and a lumber factory, so we also have a lot of loggers and that sort of stuff. It's a pretty diverse industry kind of place for being so small. This is the best piece of art I've ever seen in my life. This is easily the cake that changed my life. We were breaking ground on the new community center that we'd been fundraising for, and someone just had this cake made, and I was like, this is the best. This like sums it all up. This is an artist statement. This is a sculpture. This is a really delicious cake. And this is, like as an artist, I went to graduate school for art. As an artist, you get told constantly, and you're told this by TV, by movies, by stories, by other people, if you want to be an artist, you have to move to the city, probably New York or LA, and you have to have a studio, and you have to make a bunch of work, then you have to sell all the work in the gallery, and you have to get representation, and you have to hobnob, and then you'll get successful. And I was like, oh man, I really don't want to do that. Not at all. And I saw this cake, and I was like, I want to do this. This sounds much more interesting to me. I want to like make things with my community. I want to make things with my neighbors. I want to get to know different kinds of places and different kinds of people. And I'm not interested in that narrative of being an artist that doesn't leave their studio and only gets to eat dainty food at receptions. I'll take all the wine, though. That's not a problem. So I work in lots of different rural communities. I prefer to work in small towns for a lot of reasons that I'll get into later. So we're going to take a little tour. I work in places that look like this. I work in places that look like this, and 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 this. This was a good one. And this, and this. So I really, as someone that works in a lot of different communities and a lot of different landscapes, I really like cherish this practice that I've built out of moving around and moving through it and building relationships with all of these different kind of landscapes and populations that live within them. The really amazing thing about living in a small town is that there's so few of you that you really have to get to know each other, which is like why I choose to live in a town of under 1,000 people. Like, I get amazing critical dialogue and feedback about my work from people that are so different from me. I have so much to learn from my neighbors, and my neighbors have so much to learn from me. And it's just this like remarkable thing that you get to experience if you take some time to live in a smaller community. So try registering for this class and go visit Jack in New Kiyama. My work always looks different too. Sometimes my work looks like really good packing lists. Sometimes it looks like a really good packed bag. Sometimes it looks like a chore chart. Sometimes it looks like a lot of laundry or really big calendars. More calendars, more planning. This is like an example of my work schedule in 2015. All of the colored parts is when I was on the road. I travel a lot for work. I do a lot of Google Docs, and I think there is an art to it. And I also build a lot of curriculums that are based on place, that help people explore place. Make a lot of publications then from my experience of places and different communities. And I also run a lot of flyer campaigns. One of the best ways to communicate in a small town is through the vernacular world of the billboard or the bulletin boards, like in the post office, the grocery store. And I found it was a really wonderful way to try and communicate about different issues. This is just an example of one of them. I have a whole presentation that's just flyers, maybe next time. Throwing parties, getting people to hang out in different ways in different places. This is from a project I did called Jukebox Party, where I would provide all the money and have people show up and play their 3 favorite songs. It's a way to get to know each other. Citizen incentive kits. I really try to encourage people to participate in their community. I usually offer donuts. Lectures that are fun in weird places. And last month, I ran the first annual International World Hot Dish Championship and had to spend 3 days making tater tots gold. Not edible. Utilizing things that already exist, like beach cams and weather cams to put on performances and programming. Or building a movie theater on a frozen lake and convincing everyone to come out and watch the movie Frozen. I try to talk a lot about self-care and the ways in communities where there's not resources, especially for mental health and other health issues, how we can share about the problems we have and set intentions and take care of one another. And then I take that whole thing to health conventions and pretend like I'm a doctor. I also really believe in the talent show as a way to showcase your neighbors and all the things that we're good at and get to know each other. These are the thrift store ladies singing a song about wombats. And I'd say basically at the crux of my practice is about 1 million meetings. If I'm going to make projects that help people in place work better together, it involves an endless string of meetings and making sure that everybody's at the table, that everybody has a voice, and that everyone has a way to listen.
So that brings us to the next part of our presentation, how to make your own way. Me and Jack and Mary have different backgrounds, different educational backgrounds, different places in the country that we grew up, and somehow we've found this way to all do our own thing that is meaningful to us. So we're going to try to break that down a little bit right now by sharing some steps with you and some parts of our projects and practices that fit into those steps. So part 1 is go exploring, so that you can figure out what you stand for. We have a nice quote from Obama that Jack likes.
Yeah, you might have noticed our name tags. We made these before this speech. However, it's a rallying cry. It was in President Obama's farewell address, and what he said is basically go be a part of your community. If you don't like what's happening, go run for city council or go be a part of it. If something needs fixing, then you're the one responsible to lace up your shoes and do some organizing about that. So I think that should be all what we do all the time. And again, the small town or your community, be whatever you set it to be, but you need to be active in it. No, people can read.
I could read it.
Okay.
For all our outward differences, we in fact all share the same proud type, the most important office in a democracy, citizen. Citizen. So you see, that's what our democracy means. It needs you. Not just when there's an election, not just when you own narrow interest is at stake, but over the full span of a lifetime. If you're tired of arguing with strangers on the internet, try talking with one of them in real life. If something needs fixing, then lace up your shoes and do some organizing.
Just a brief comment on that. Unfortunately, that word citizen has become something new in just this past year and a half. So it's kind of a weird part. Like this under there sometimes comes in a different context. And I think words mean things and go back to what the word really means. And I guess it's something that I've struggled with now, just because of the new context. This is something.
He's talking about immigration
Yeah,
reform now.
yeah, and just the exclusion of people that aren't quote, actual like legal citizens.
You can be a
You can be a
citizen in
citizen.
your community and not be a legal citizen.
Yeah. A friend of mine sent a note to me from Marfa, Texas, which is riddled with lots of thoughts and criticisms. So don't focus on that. But I'll read it out here. As a young professional, I have no clear perception of my future. I only know that it depends on my energy, self-criticism, discipline, and permanent desire to try. So that's another title I sometimes take on as young professional.
So did you get this note before you came to Green River or after?
Right as I did.
Right as you did.
Yeah.
So part of Jack's Go Exploring, part of Jack's Going Exploring was becoming an AmeriCorps Vista in Green River, in the same way that perhaps you want to become an AmeriCorps Vista somewhere else or in New Kuyama. There's opportunities to go explore and see the unknown.
Yeah. This is a sign just outside of Green River. It's pointing out there's 110 miles to the next services. It's actually the longest stretch in the lower 48 with no services, so everyone kind of has to stop in Green River.
Part of my going exploring was making this toolkit. I was in school. It's called the Center for Person by Person Research. It compiled a bunch of different people's work that I was really interested in. And I showed it to a professor that was not in my department, but was actually doing the master's department at the time. And I was like, so what do you think? And he's like, well, now go do something. So it's good to like catalog who you're inspired by, make beautiful tools, share the ideas that you're interested in, but then you still have to go try and practice them. So then while I was still in school, I went to Green River. I actually didn't meet Jack or Mary on this trip, but I'll meet them a little in another visit to Green River. But I followed a professor out to Green River to help her do this newspaper. Her and another artist had been collaborating with high school students there on all the content for a month or almost 2 months. And I just came out and designed it really quickly. But I was like, oh yeah, this is the stuff. I gotta come back here. I think I'd already applied for the artist residency program in Green River at that point. But it was like this good experiment of like, okay, yeah, this is closer to where I wanna be.
And this is how I go exploring. Because I was really determined to not have an urban-centric practice that revolved around a studio and a gallery, I had to search really hard to find opportunities that I felt suited my time and my interests. So I was looking for residency programs or projects or funding that would allow me to work within communities, and specifically rural communities. So I spend a lot of time, even now, driving back and forth across the country to these different communities that I work with.
Like right now.
Like right now, yeah. I'm on the blue, this year's the blue line, so the light blue line, yeah. I haven't put in Iowa yet.
Top and down the left.
Yeah, every color's a different year. Some years are busier than others. But what became really important is I had all of these different places and all of these different people that mattered to me, but also all of these miles in between. And I felt a responsibility to really get to know all of the spaces that I was traveling through, to not treat it like just hauling across on the interstate, to really take time in between places to continue to grow my network and experience of this country. So I developed a mobile road residency program where I would take a friend with me in the car for a trip, and we'd produce a body of work from the trip. It always looks a little bit differently. Sometimes it's films, sometimes it's paintings, sometimes it's performances, sometimes it's photographs, sometimes it's field guides. So I did that for like 6 or 7 years, just really trying to engage in process and place while I was on the road. And all of that turned into a larger project, which I'm still working on now, that I started 6 years ago, called God Bless the USPS. And it's a long architectural survey of every rural post office in America. Every post office in America, but I'm starting with the rural ones. I'm 997 in. Been working on it for 6 years. All those blue dots are the places I've been to and I've photographed. I have a book that was just released about the post offices of the High Plains. It's called Star Route 1. You can order it online. Got a website, and I've got big plans. And I also think it's like a lifetime project, but it keeps me going across the country in different ways, engaging with the ways that we communicate with one another, and also celebrating this really beautiful institution of the post office.
So now that you've gone exploring and you sort of know what you stand for, part 2 is applying your skill set. So what are you good at? What do you like to do? And what do you want to do better? We have another quote that Jack likes. Should I just read it? Yeah. Okay. Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love.
Yeah, so I think, for me, that quote is about like our opportunity to correct what's wrong, and I think it's a lot of grays in between. And certainly it's not just right and wrong, but sometimes there are things that are definitively wrong and need attention. This is the Epicenter office when we bought it for $5,000 in 2009. That's Rand, my best friend from college, and he and I started Epicenter. I think this is again, I was talking about the research component. The census data for rural places is very bad. You'll see margins of error on the census data. I've seen like plus or minus 34%, and that's just like it's not information anymore. So when we tried to figure out what's the condition of homes in town, if you're in a city, you can look to the census and you can reference it. But if you're in places really like under 15,000. That information is so wildly, up to interpretation. So what we did is drive around to every single house 6 times, different people in the car, and figured out using USDA rural development standards what the conditions of the homes were in town. And we found that 46% of homes were in need of repairs.
Sounds like a really good use of an architect to me. This is when I actually met Jack and Mary. So I went back to Green River for this artist residency called the Frontier Fellowship, and I had made other publications at that point, but this publication was about place, and it was using archival stuff and things I was finding then, and I wrote a short essay, and I did collecting and sampling and talking to people and quoting them, and I look back on this publication now and I think, oh, this was me starting the newspaper in some ways that I work on now. But with this, I was like creating a way for people to deeper dive into tourism. I was thinking about this place that in some way, now it has some very expensive branding that's been applied to it, but at this time there were some trail maps, but there was no branding for the town, and I wanted to give people a way to get a little bit deeper into the place that they were visiting. It's this place that lots of cars travel through, but not many people stop. So applying some skills. And I came back to Green River and I did a mural with some kids with a partner of mine. We collected invasive plant species and painted this wall. So I was trying out some beautification, some education, some applying environmental learning, seeing how my skill set could be useful to different populations outside of me. At this time, I'm at Wyden and Kennedy, and I'm like making ads all day, and I got this week away to go try to apply my skills in a different way. And during that time, I also made another publication, day job, which was women's perspectives on making art and making a living. I think we curated, me and a friend, Taryn, curated like 36 different artists' work, and I was like, oh, this feels really good, and then also giving more voice and power to the communities that I was interested in. Yeah. Skill set. Apply your skill set.
Apply my skill set. So my skill set, I think, it involves mostly being a neighbor. I call myself a citizen artist. This is the definition of a citizen artist that I made up. But it's like pretty normal now. I see it quoted a lot, and I'm into that. The role of the citizen artist is to discern, nurture, cultivate, and encourage the existing culture of a place, not imposing a new culture on a place, not thinking that you have to go to an urban center to get culture, but to realize that all places have culture. A lot of the stuff that Ashley was talking about, how there's things to celebrate and encourage and nurture in every place and in every community. So my skill set looks like deep participation in community. Jack and I lived together in Green River for 3 or 4 years, and this is us at the watermelon cooking contest. We made watermelon tempura. We dressed like our dish. We made ourselves a trophy, and we won. It's all about like really getting into the local culture. I believe that artists are so important to our communities, that artists need to be neighbors. Artists are allowed to take risks in a way that a lot of other disciplines aren't. We're allowed to be kind of weird. We're allowed to like mess up and be sloppy, and we're also allowed to be like really earnest. So I like to organize intergenerational hangouts, which is easy to do in rural places because there's not that many of us, but just as a way to like hang out and get to know each other and spend time together outside of our workday. Back to the stuff we're talking about, citizenship. This is a kit that I use to like give your neighbor citizenship, also trying to take that word back. It doesn't have to be something that's bestowed by the government. It's something that like we already inherently are by living and participating in our communities. We have the authority of citizens of our communities to care for ourselves and to care for the people around us. That's a city council punch card to try and get people to go to city council. Exploring places, mapping places, making diagrams of places, using my skill set as someone that likes to look and listen and figuring out how to translate that story to other audiences. And then also related to Ashley's work, the idea of the story swap and the story sharing and finding ways to do hyper-local storytelling within a community. I run a press in Palouse, which is just me, and a print museum. But that's really about like trying to get people to share their stories and finding different ways of publishing their stories. I like to shoot skate videos. Back to my flyer campaigns. I was shooting skate videos and I made this flyer about how I was gonna build a half pipe in my backyard. And it was great because all these people called and left messages about how they had scrap wood for the skater dude. And I was like, well, I'm not really gonna build that half pipe. But I did have everybody's number and I got them all in touch with each other. And they started their own coalition. So now like we're about to get a really big, beautiful skate park that we've been working on for 4 years as a community. And it all just started with one flyer. Using design and creative thinking to deal with community issues. This was when I was doing bicycling advocacy up in Fergus Falls, and there was a lot of argument within the city about bike lanes and, bike access, like rights of bicyclists. So I made these series of like really cool pirate flags that everyone could wear on their bikes so that wherever you were riding was a bike lane. And then teaching is also a part of my practice. I really like to spend time in non-traditional classrooms. I teach a course that's on the road. Enrollment just opened yesterday. If you'd like to register, it's called the Art and Rural Environments Field School. We explore on the road. This is not that course. This is a course for kids about utopia, where we learn how to build a world that we want to see. And we learn about things like consensus decision making. Community gardens. Sometimes a lot of projects, especially in small communities, all they need is for someone to get it started. So this was as simple as building a box and getting some good dirt to like get a community garden initiative off the ground. I also really like shooting lookbooks for thrift stores. I used to lead a Girl Scout troop. We only used guides from before the 1950s. Putting on performances and events, really just trying to come up with anything I can do within my skill set that will help celebrate the everyday kind of things that I'm living in and near. And using underused spaces and turning them into venues. This was a trashy backyard lot that we turned into an outdoor porch patio. I really believe in porches, no matter what they look like. And I also spent a few years in Palouse running a venue out of a storefront that no one was using. And the cool thing about the venue was it wasn't about sales. It was more like an open studio, a community living room. We'd throw parties, we'd do movie screenings, we'd host bands, we let bands do practice there. It was really whatever idea people could come to the table with, we had a space and like a production team to pull it off for them. Here's just some examples of what that looked like. It's also like a drop-in area after school, and we worked on puzzles all winter.
Okay, so you've gone exploring, you've applied your skill set, you've probably got a mixed bag of results at this point. So we reach part 3, how winding is the road? Prepare yourself for roadblocks, burnout, and sunsets.
So I think this is going back to, if we'll remember from earlier, this program where we went around and figured out through research that 46% of the homes were in need of repairs. We started this program called Fix It First. There's lots of money given to urban places for home repairs, so much so that you just meet a qualifying need and you can get a home repair for free by a licensed professional. It's CDBG money, if anybody is really nerdy like me. But in rural places, it doesn't reach there. It's all gobbled up before it gets down to there. So after going and talking to the county about getting that money, and after them saying no, and after going to the state to complain about our county, and them also saying no, and then writing your U.S. senators, we went and found our own money from private money from the Bike and Build is a program that if you're under 26, I think they raise the age of 26, you can bike across the country, and with a group of 30 other people your age, you raise money for affordable housing, and in some places, like in Green River, you stop and help out. So we had, whenever they came through, this is like, in one day we did all these projects with those people, re-roofing, re-siding, putting up a guardrail. This guy here, Glenn, he was an actual rocket scientist. There's rockets in Green River that they used to shoot off in the 60s and 70s, trying to figure out how to get back into the atmosphere so they could get astronauts back from the moon. He worked on that project. He built this house, but yet he was getting older and aging in place, and his home wasn't safe for an elderly person. It didn't have, we did this handrail, but also guardrails inside and in the shower, so that he didn't fall down and have hurt his hip or something, which can be actually a death sentence for older people. But certainly, at least in Green River, the nearest place to go rehabilitate is 100 miles away. So in your older life, you got hurt, you have to move 100 miles away from your community and your family to go to a place to rehabilitate after a surgery. So we do things like this that are called generally critical home repairs. So the money that is supposed to be funding these things wasn't coming, so we just went around it. Like, not just beat your head up against the wall all the time, not just like go back and forth and saying like, well, yeah, well, we need it, and you're like, well, you can't have it, well, we need it, but just finding our own way around it.
And with this, you guys were also doing loans for like small interest or no interest, I don't know.
Right, so we got $10,000 from Bike and Build. You can also apply to them for a grant, and that's the highest amount you can get. And we got that the first year, and then over the years added a little bit more to it. And so these home repairs average about $800. In 3 and 4 years, we did 47 home repairs, all kind of at a scale of $800. So half of a roof or siding and windows on this project. And then everyone paid it back. No one wanted handouts. It's like common misconception that people just like want to use government resources. And again, this isn't government resources. So on the sign, if we go back, we made sure to, you can't read it, but we made sure to point out that it was funded by private money. But anyway, so people wanted to pay it back, and we just set it up. We were the financer, we were the bank. So people paid back the $800 and $40 payments over 2 years, with 1 or 3% interest, depending on their income. And the interest was just like our little joke to the town, like all the people that were well off, still like in a rural Utah version, but the people that didn't need the service, they could say, well, they're not just paying it back, they're actually paying it back with interest. And we would earn like $5 on this $800 project, but it made it sell better in the town for a very conservative place.
So there's almost always workarounds.
Yeah.
This is your sunsetting.
So the idea of sunsetting is an idea in organizations that's at some points you can be done, that things don't have to start and be perpetual all the time. Like, you don't have to start a program that runs, you don't have to do an event that runs every year. You don't have to start a program that serves forever. At some point, you can have, here's our goal that we want to meet, and when we meet that goal, we're done, and we close up shop, and we're not operating forever. So I think a lot more organizations and a lot more ideas should have that freedom of, like, I don't have to commit to doing this forever. I can put my full effort in, and if it works, great, and hopefully someone will take it on and do it themselves, like the skate park example. Like, hopefully, if it's a good enough idea, then the community will run it, and you could just been there for that, for the spark. We also worked on a trails development program. Like Corbin was mentioning, a lot of people are coming through Green River. There's a talk of trails all the time. They talked about this trail that went down to the geyser, 5 miles down the river all the time. I went down and hiked it, and it took me 5 hours, and there was no trail. And they're like, oh yeah, well that trail was like 25 years ago. But everyone talked about it as if the trail was there all the time. So we used our skill set, developed some trails. It has been 9 years of talking about trails, 6 years of diligent work working with like the National Park Service, with the city and the state outdoor recreation department. And a trail just opened a week ago, the first trail, after 6 years of meeting like every other month with and starting a trails committee, getting the funding. It takes a long time to do things. Duration.
Duration. Prepare for roadblocks. Okay, so this is my sunsetting picture. I went and worked at Nike, right? And I was working for Nike Women, and I had this idea that I could, change the perception of the female form. I could change how misogynist Nike was. I was gonna be at the top of their communication level so that I would really have some change. And that maybe just me being a designer in that role was important enough to be seen and visualized that way. Within the first 6 months of me being there, I was brought in under a female creative director. She saw that book I had made, Day Job, so I was like, oh yeah, you get me. Like, I'm about empowering women. I'm about showing creativity. She was on a floor. There are 13 brands housed within Nike. You have Jordan and athletics and sportswear, all these sub-brands. All the creative directors are men. She's Nike Women. She was the only female creative director. Within 6 months, they got rid of her. I was without a creative director for 2 months, and by the time I left, I had a male creative director, a male design director, and a male art director all above me, and I had 3 women who were 21 all working underneath me. So you had all these really young, amazing creative women and a bunch of male leadership on a floor where there was all male leadership. And yeah, I got, like, these are pictures of, like, I typeset that Nike Women, right? Like, I got to make I made this manual for the largest fitness event in the world for women, right? And it was like in China and Australia, and I'm like seeing my creative get really, really big and seeing like the scope, and that was really, really exciting. At the same time, I'm like listening to the male dialogue in my room and seeing my ideas get watered down and watered down and watered down. I'm like, this is not going where I want it to go. So I left. And I started making little posters about ideas I was having. And I started giving them to friends. I sent out the PDFs. These are at the Women's March in LA. I wasn't there, but my posters were. I put up like 300 in New Orleans over New Year's, and I didn't know where any of this work was going, and I'll get into where some of that work went later on. But when things don't work, you don't have to stick it out. When things don't make sense, you don't have to stick it out. If there's work you want to make that you don't know where it goes or what it means, make it anyway.
Cool. I'm going to talk about the daily burnout. I feel like part of our job as people that work in communities and work with these kind of tough social justice issues, like part of the job is making it look really fun and making it look really easy so we can convince all you guys to come do it too. But I mean, I'd also like to have a transparent moment of honesty and say that it's really difficult, and that, as an artist, I have a 35-hour-a-week office job where I'm just writing funding applications, or I'm just reporting on grants, or I'm just trying to make spreadsheets and budgets and make all these projects happen. It's a lot of moving, for myself especially, it's a lot of being on the road to make ends meet, a lot of cobbling together a lot of different commissions and places, which also means like a lot of homesickness and not getting to be at home all of the time. This picture was taken like at a really terrible point in my life. I was on the East Coast doing work in North Carolina, and I got like a text from a friend, and they were like, "Hey, I like heard this rumor that like your building got condemned." And I was like, "What? That's crazy." And so I like call my postmaster, and I was like, "Hey, Richard, is there some mail for me? I've only been gone 2 weeks, but like I just heard the Palouse Arms got condemned." I'd been living in this building for like 4 years. And he was like, "Oh yeah, there's something from the property manager." I was like, "Can you open it up and read it to me?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And he like reads me my eviction notice while I'm 2,000 miles away working on a project, and I'm supposed to be gone for 2 months, but I have to like fly home and vacate the property and put all my stuff in storage, and have no answer to that. I had to keep doing my work because I had to keep making money, which meant I was on the road a lot, but I also all of a sudden had no home to go back to. Like I was homeless for about 6 months till I met this guy on the beach in Utah. Moved in like a week later. But it was a really difficult, disorienting time to like have to like maintain my practice and maintain momentum, but also deal with homelessness as a real issue. And lucky enough to have a car that I could live in, but having nowhere else I could go. And also lucky enough to meet someone that shared the same kind of ethics around rural places and community organizing and activism that I could live with, which has then become great because through Jack, I was able to meet Corbin. We were able to work in all these communities together, and in a lot of ways, it really broadened my network to be able to spend time in another place that was the same size as my home place, but really radically different.
Okay, so you have gone exploring, you have applied your skill set, you've gone through some roadblocks, you've prepared for them, you've worked through them, and now part 4, who is your community? Neighboring as a practice. We have another quote that Jack likes. I will read it. "An architect can help us discover what is noble and help create the opportunity for people to realize their innate nobility."
So I think also, anyone can do that, but I think
Replace architect with anyone.
right. But also to the idea of that culture exists already and that nobility is already there and no one is inhuman because of their circumstance. And this point too about like, yeah, there can be a lot of stress in your life and you can even be homeless, but you can still like, you still are human. You still like need to express yourself positively. And just because you're in a circumstance doesn't mean that you don't still have the human needs that exist. This is just a cleanup of, that street looks shitty, so we cleaned it up. That's Broadway. That's the main street in Green River. This is me talking to the mayor. One of my favorite things to do, wearing these actually. One of my favorite things to do is
Actually belong to Kelly.
yeah. What favorite things to do is to talk to the mayor. The mayor is Mormon, very conservative. He's my next door neighbor. Doesn't like when I have parties. Doesn't like when y'all come and have a fire. Apparently he complained about that. But I already had talked to City Hall about it before he complained. But
Neighboring as a practice.
yeah, literally neighboring. But there's this kind of rule of thumb that you have to say things 5 times before someone hears you, and then probably 25 times before that they're saying it too. So the mayor is here at the Frontier House under construction, and he now, by this point of this is me 8.5 years in, he finally is saying some of the sentences that I was saying years ago. He's finally it's just become, he's like, I've heard this enough that now it's what we think. It's what our town thinks. I also served on the planning commission for 4 years and became the chairman and snuck a lot of things in there. So he's also saying those things because they're now law. This house could only be built because I changed the rule from 850 square foot minimum size for a home to 650 square foot. So now we can build this house that's appropriately sized for the town. So neighboring as a practice. Talk to your neighbor mayor.
And then now your community.
So
You get to do some different things.
yeah, I kept my head down and kind of ostrich in the sand in some ways for a long time in Green River, but got the chance to apply for Rabbit Island, which is this island off the coast of Lake Superior. It's in Lake Superior. It's off the Keweenaw Peninsula, 91 acres. It was bought off of a Craigslist ad by a doctor who's our age from New York. And they turned it into an artist residency. And Mary had been there before, and Kelly, Mary, and I applied to go as a 3-person team, and we applied to be human buoys. There's all these buoys out in the lake telling you what water level is and what the temperature is and all that sort of stuff. We were going to be human buoys collecting information. We were going to measure the tides. We cut sections across the land. This is the architectural idea of a section, but instead of drawing it or like measuring how high up and down the ground went, we got a really sensitive recorder, swam out into the lake, ocean lake, and then recorded the sound and spent 45 minutes walking due north across the island without saying anything. And then we represented the sound cloud of that as a section and then did it again the other way, among other projects.
So I now am an independent design practitioner, whatever you want to call it. And so now I get to help people on the outside of big brands become bigger, become stronger. Most of my clients are small female entrepreneurs. For the first 2 years that I was freelance, I had not one man hire me. All my clients were women. Which maybe shows you bias or maybe just shows taste. So one of my clients is Emily Katz. She's this amazing macrame artist. She has gotten this rope from, it's organic cotton grown in the US. She's working with this guy in Turkey who has made all these things, so he's twisting the rope, and now she is gonna be the North American distributor of this rope. She has a whole movement behind her of women making things in all of these circles, and this is going to be sold in Joann Fabrics. So it's I get to play a different role as far as empowering women and empowering my community. Now I'm like on the team of the people I want to be on the team of, and that feels a lot better. Another one of my favorite clients is Andy Bixel. She started making cannabis-infused ice cream 6 years ago in the medical market in Oregon, and then in the last year she's branched out to these little gem candies. But with her, I get to make really fun, playful stuff, and it gets to be silly, and it gets to be bright, and it gets to be colorful, and I get to help her build her business. So it's, my community, I've gotten to make it what makes sense for me.
I'll move that into the idea of community being wherever you are. Can we be provisional citizens when we are in those places? Can we be itinerant neighbors? Can we use neighboring as a practice as an artist? Like as an artist and a neighbor, what can I do? As a designer and a neighbor, what can I do? As an architect and a neighbor, what can I do? And I'm just going to show an example of one of the homeboat projects that we did last summer up in St. James, Minnesota, as like a way of pulling that neighboring practice and applying it to a community that we didn't live in, but that we had the opportunity to spend time in. Feel free to jump in on this one, Jack. We lived at the Super 8. This is a picture from the Super 8 lobby. We were 3 grown-ass adults living in one hotel room. It was a nightmare. So there was a call put out by the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership, the staff that Ashley talked about working with today. And they put out a call for artists that was really interesting. This is the call for artists. They had completed a housing study. They wanted to focus on preservation and maintenance of existing housing stock. They formed a housing committee, and the problem was it has been difficult to identify all those who are in need, and many households who have been identified do not have the means to address these types of issues on their own. The goal of this project is to increase household outreach and increase household knowledge. And it was a call for artists. We're like, all right, this is great. We get to go to a small town. We get to work in the arts. We get to work in housing. It seems really open-ended. They weren't like asking for a solution in the proposal. They were really just like requesting process. So, well, we got the commission. It was a great big deal. It was Kelly and Jack and I that were on this project. And then we really had to think about, okay, we got the commission in February. We were going out there in June. What can we do to get to know a place before we get there? And like, what are the ways we can prepare and research for this project? Conversational research is really important to us, but that's something that you do face to face. It's about hanging out and spending time. So one thing we did from afar was scour the internet for like every like Chamber of Commerce roster, every town leader and their phone number. We made this big spreadsheet and we held a phone-a-thon where we called all these people and asked them a bunch of questions. Questions like, what's St. James like? And what's the best jukebox in town? Who's the most interesting person in town? Can you give us their phone number? As a way to just really try and get a sense of what it was like there, what people were thinking about, what the issues were, what their favorite thing about living was there, what their least favorite thing was. We also had access to all the documents that the Housing Partnership had put out, and Jack and Kelly went through every single one of them and made notes, and like we learned about the housing resources that were available. You guys basically annotated the housing study, right? Do you want to talk about that?
I mean, a housing study is, I think it was 74 pages long. And so it's really dry, but I had done a housing study in Green River, so I knew some of the key, their tricks. So we just went through and read it all, made comments, asked questions of Kelly and I asking of each other, asking Mary if it made any sense to her.
And then explaining it all to
If
me.
it doesn't make sense to her, it's certainly not making sense to like people in the town that are supposed to execute a plan. But yeah, and I guess I would point out that we also put what language each of these resources was in, and you can see that every single one was in English, but 45% of the town is Spanish speaking.
You don't want to keep this mic?
Easily identified.
All right, so we did all of that. We did hours and hours and hours of research before we got there, but it's really, I mean, you can only learn so much from the internet and from talking on the phone. And this is what our outreach strategies looked like when we were there. We were there for 13-day periods. 2 weeks, guys. There's a lot you can do in 2 weeks. I don't want to hear this 2-week excuse anymore. So we were there for 2 weeks. We went to all of these businesses. We frequented all the businesses all the time. We went to every bar every night. We went to almost every church on Sunday, just as a way to try and get to know people, to be part of the social fabric of a community, to become familiar with that community and to let that community become familiar with us. We shopped local, we ate from the grocery store, we went to the Eagles Club every day, we went to the tractor pool, we played bingo on Monday nights, we learned how to play Cube. We're really good at it, still undefeated. And we also tabled at the county fair. From all the interviews we'd done before, we set up in-person interviews with community leaders to talk about these issues. These are more formal interviews, usually lasting about an hour, from different leaders that work with different social services in the area, just trying to get a handle on what's accessible and what's available. And then, again, spending a lot of time off the clock, after hours, just getting to know people is probably, again, back to duration, back to entrenchment, back to hanging out. Like, that was the most functional part of our practice, was spending time with people. Anything to add there? So from our 2 weeks of outreach and learning and research on site, what we decided to do was to prioritize 3 actions for this project. Outreach, connecting residents and assisting follow-through to enable to perform these healthy housing assessments, to start a housing resource guide where people could find out what kind of things that they were eligible for, and to also draft a series of implementation strategies for the housing committee to start to address these problems. Now, when an organization that's there to hire artists hires architects and designers and artists to do a project, they usually expect something built. They don't always understand how this is art. I understand this as art, but I have a very elastic idea of the word. And we are also very, very committed to spending our project budget locally, regionally, and also compensating the community members that were working with us on this. Anything to add? So we started working with these strategies. We came up with a visual identity for the project as a way to like start being recognized throughout town. All of our neighborhood advocates that were working with us had name tags, and we designed business cards for them. We came up with this logo that incorporated like cultural colors that were relative to the community. And we started making sure that everything was printed in English and Spanish. This is more of the work. So then we came back for another 2 weeks in a month, the next month, and we ran a bilingual community workshop that connected the leaders in the Latino community, La Convivencia Hispania, with the housing committee, and then also other interested community members. It was a really amazing evening of people finally being at the same table and being able to share with each other and start to design solutions for the housing issues in town. There's Jack talking to city council. I don't remember what it was about, do you?
Just a project update.
Yeah, we would go to city council and give our project updates. Here's like the worksheet that we had at the community workshop. What are the needs for your community? What are the barriers for accessing resources? And what are some solutions? La Convivencia Hispania, the local advocacy group we ended up working with, were these incredible mobilizers. Like, once we were able to hook up with them and communicate about these resources, they went door to door, neighbor to neighbor, connecting people that they knew with the resources that they were available. And this is the most important part. Like, you can turn people into demographics and you can create data for funders, but what's important is humanizing these issues. As soon as people in town understood that there were things their neighbor needed that they could help them get, it was a totally different game. Like, being able to talk to us, figure out what's possible, hook them up with a housing partnership, and then like schedule all these healthy home assessments that were getting people smoke alarms and getting people other resources they needed is much different than just looking at a page of numbers and knowing that there's 39 broken windows. Those are statistics you need oftentimes for funding, but they're not the statistics that get neighbors to work together. And then from all of our research and all that, we created the Healthy Housing Initiative Handbook, which is a spiral-bound bilingual handbook that was given to all the members of La Convivencia Hispania and the Housing Committee. And I'm going to let Jack talk you through what's in that handbook.
Well, I mean, it was just like what we set out to do. So we talked about how did we do this project, what was the roadmap that we used so that this could be used again or used as a case study for another small town. Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership saw St. James as an example of what they saw happening in a lot of other communities they served, so they wanted something that could maybe be looked at again in a different place. Of course, it would have to be probably pretty different in every different place. So we just kind of laid out our strategy. We talked about a handyman program. There's lots of repairs that weren't being done to homes because contractors didn't show up or didn't call back, or when they showed up, they suddenly changed the price to something like triple what they said. So there's a lot of states handyman exemptions where you don't have to be a contractor. So we found out about that, figured out how to get people signed up. And the housing guide, like we said, we had also went around to every place and asked what programs they have, if you need citizenship to apply for it. How much money could you expect? What sort of services are? So we created that housing resource guide, put in all of our spreadsheets, tracked all of our hours. There's a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of hour tracking and this sort of work, and just gave them an implementation strategy of what to do. And then Mary went back and visited them.
Yeah. So the thing that's really great about this, it was taking something that was as dry as a housing study, but using design and outreach to make it accessible. So like we created basically what's being used as a workbook in town now. I was back there about a week and a half ago visiting with the community, and it's all taken off. Like they're working the implementation strategies one at a time. They've got a revolving loan program going through the city. They've finished I think 60 home repair projects now. They had the kickoff of the handyman program. They had 31 handymen register. 11 of them were women, and they'll all be available to residents in St. James. They're continuing to pay their neighborhood advocates, which is so important that we compensate the people that are putting in the on-the-ground work. And they've made a brand new housing resource guide that's like been distributed all over town. So everyone that works in social services now has this guide to what's available for tenants and owners of houses.
Okay, this is the final part. Grow your circle of friends. So you've gone exploring, you have applied your skill set, you've hit some roadblocks, sunset, yada yada. You know your community, you understand how to get to know communities, so now you're ready to really grow your body of work and redefine your own authority. Because you get to decide how successful you are. Nobody else gets to decide. So I don't know if you want to touch on, you've already talked about Rabbit Island, but I think Homeboat has been a part of this. Mary will touch on that a little bit, of growing the community of circle, growing who you can work with, how your scope can change. For Jack, that's also been going out to Nukuyama.
Yeah, so I now work in Nukuyama, as we've said a few times, and I went out there.
It looks like this.
It looks like this.
Part of it looks like this.
Mary and I went out there because basically we didn't understand what they were doing. Their website was very vague, as Epicenter's website always is. It's very hard to talk about and represent it. And it's also, you hit this kind of point of like, am I aestheticizing poverty? Am I like, it gets weird. But it's also just very hard to talk about this work without being in the place. So Mary and I went out there. They eventually hired me to come be a consultant. We did another housing plan or housing assessment there this past November. And this is sort of like what they're doing is trying to get people to come from urban places to this rural place. So they host these fancy schmancy dinners with like fish and like fancy mixed drinks with like plants inside of them. It's crazy. It's California, but it's all these people have so much money and a lot of interest in supporting like where they recreate and where they go to connect to nature and all these sorts of things. So I think what the trick is that maybe like 1 in 10 will go the next step. 90% of people just like want to pay for the hut and have their experience and then go back to LA. But I think just finding those people, having those conversations so that you can find those people that maybe will come back again or want to talk about something more, or know someone that knows someone that can connect a resource to you, so that you can be able to do what's important to be doing.
Cool. So I made those little flyers, right, and gave them out to be friends and put them around towns. And through putting that work out there, my reach grew, right, and people understood what I was about and what I wanted to say. And so a friend of a friend has this shop on the corner in downtown Portland, Frances May, and she let me put up whatever I wanted in the window. So it was a sale on yourself. It says your value is you. The posters behind it say no limits, no expectation, no exceptions. So getting to spread that message through putting what you want out there and not necessarily knowing where it'll land. This is an Adidas project from last year that instead of doing designs to sell shoes, they're like, hey, we are gonna have some shoes at this event in LA. It's Step Up, it's a foundation to partner, to give mentors to young women. Adidas, the client, said, I think we could bring a Maybelline makeup specialist out and we could do mini makeovers at this female empowerment event. And I was like, we're not gonna do that. You guys can't do that. And I had to sit in the room and tell them why we weren't gonna do that. And instead they made their own posters of going their own way, doing their own thing. They put them up. They also got shoes. But at least they didn't have more enforcements that their physical appearance was their value. So getting to design more participation within my design work, trying to find the people that want my viewpoint and not just want a female art director on their team. And then this newspaper has been
It's completely community supported. It has 120 subscribers, and they pay for the printing essentially, and everything else is donated. My time's donated, every single contributor, all my copy editors, you're looking at 2 of them. So many people are giving their time and energy to this paper every single month, and 120 people keep saying, hey, make this newspaper. So I asked, and my community is growing, and everywhere I go, I get to meet more people that are interested in telling stories about how we're connected and opposed to how we're disconnected. So yeah, that's that. Oh, and I get to make fun parties, connect people that way too.
The engine behind my practice and growing my circle of friends is wanting to do like excellent radical work every single day and wanting to see my friends as often as possible. So it involves a lot of collaborating over the internet and working on projects. And it also involves being in a lot of collectives. To be able to get projects big enough to pay you well, you need like a good team, and the team should be made up of your best friends, because then you're also gonna have a really good time doing it. So this is one collective I'm in. It's called Cabin Time, and we run a roaming creative residency to remote places. About once a year, we take 12 artists off-grid to a really remote, strange place and have them out there for 8 days, no screens, cooperative, intentional isolation. We make a beautiful collaborative body of work, and we also make forever friendships, which is the most important part. So we're building this like network of people that are connected through an experience across the nation. So the project I'm working on right now with the Department of Public Perks, which I work for in Fergus Falls, Minnesota. And it's a multidisciplinary artist-led initiative using art and play and civic practice to intervene in issues in the community in a playful, non-threatening way. We're sponsoring local citizen-led projects for $500 each, being able to give that money away and support local ideas, and also like coming up with a lot of creative, strange, like I had a happy hour study hall. What is that? I don't know, but people showed up. It was really fun. It's also when we built the theater on the frozen lake was for this project. I get to work on public transformation with Ashley. Heard a little bit about that already. It's great to be on a team of really rad women that are invested in learning more about communities in rural America. I'm part of M12 Studio, which is an interdisciplinary group of artists and writers and researchers, and we do a lot of formal work about the rural aesthetic. We do a lot of research work about the rural condition, and we also like go on tour and eat tacos every day. I'm part of a collective called Camp Little Hope. We work in education and climate change and how to talk to communities about climate change and designing solutions for those different futures. And I'm also in this really great collective called Homeboat, which is a crew of doers focused on community engagement, radical architecture, ethical design, and really good times. Sum up? Let's make Jack do it.
So I guess this is how we tried to understand what we've done, and I think it's hard. Like looking back now in New Kiama, I just am seeing like a lot of the same things that was early Green River when I was there those first couple of years. Just trying to figure out my, gain my balance and find which way to walk. So I think we lay it out as if it's like, just do these things, you'll be great. Which I guess you would be, but it's also going to be really tough, and it's going to be, if you pursue it, you gotta have to really commit to it, and it's gonna take a long time. And like I was saying earlier before, we were talking about the project, I think it's really important just not to predetermine what the result's gonna be, whether it's within a project that it'll be something built or a product, or even just like what's gonna happen to you. So I went to Green River as an AmeriCorps Vista for 1 year. And my goal was to build a house, because that's what I thought that you did as an architect, and I thought that's what you did to fix housing. What I've realized 9 years later, 10 years later, is that you can't fix housing just by building a house, and I can't fix housing alone. But what I do know now, even more than ever, from the research and from working with people, is that there is a problem and there is a wrong that exists in the world. People don't have shelter. They don't, like, we always talk about food, water, and shelter as like the three basic things of human existence, and there's so many people without shelter, without secure shelter, without affordable shelter, but it just seems like we're not addressing it. So there's a wrong that exists, and so I'm like convicted, and I know that it's what I will try to do is to fix that in as many places as possible. And sometimes that looks like a housing assessment, and sometimes that looks like spending time on an island with no electricity with two good friends, and sometimes it means standing here today. So I think that's the end of the presentation, but we are around, and we also
question time.
have questions, and we also made a point not to have a question mark at the end of questions, so it's required that you ask questions, and we'll point at you if you don't. Mary's the pointer. Looks like Catherine as well.
Yeah, I was looking at that last. I love how you laid it out, like all these. Okay. Yeah, so go exploring, apply your skill set, how winding is the road, who is your community, grow your circle of friends. And I was looking at that thinking, could you do it the opposite way? Or like, could you make it a circle where it keeps, right?
It's a cycle.
Yeah,
Totally.
right,
Keep
so you
doing
can,
it all over and over.
over and over again, yeah.
Yeah, there's so much that's just diligence, you know, like the discipline and interdisciplinary of like, keep going back, keep doing it, keep figuring it out, keep finding your teachers, right?
Yeah, and do you have any, what do you do in those moments when you're first, can you think back to when you were first starting out? And you showed that great picture of you sort of by yourself under the bridge, right? What do you do in those moments?
I mean, I think there's so much of just feeling like a totally incompetent and like a total idiot and doing it anyway. And that's where it's like redefining your authority. You can believe that you don't have any power, you can believe that everybody else has the answers, and you can still think that, but don't act on it, you know? There's so much of all of our practices where like belief is a huge part of it. Belief that you could change anything, you know, that your work could matter at all, right? You can go work somewhere and have a boss and have someone who tells you what to do every day. I did it. It hurt me. It physically hurt me. My back pain was horrible. I left that job. I don't have chronic back pain anymore. But for some people that works, to go and have the boss. And if you do that, then you don't have all these administrative jobs, you know, like somebody does your timesheet and someone pays you every other week. So there's benefits to not believing in yourself. But I would say, yeah, own your authority. For me, like being alone in that studio in Portland, so many moments of like, God, what am I doing? Does this make sense? I'm like, every month I got by, you know, and my work kept building, the reception to my work kept building. Starting this newspaper, I'm like, who the hell do I think I am that I can start a newspaper? And the comments that I get of like, a print newspaper, you know, like, and I'm like, yeah, print newspaper. But if it's what you want to do, you just have to do it. No one else is going to make your work for you. So you have to do it even when you think it's crazy.
Sometimes you just have to shotgun the beer behind the 7-Eleven and like get back to it.
Do you feel like you have a hard time like balancing some of the projects you're like in the middle of while you get like inspired by new ones, or like are you constantly like working on like 5 at once almost, it seems like? And like how do you balance out like this one's the one I should be working on most right now and this one should be on the back burner? Like
Great question. Time management's part of that. I'd also say that I can at least speak for myself. Like I have a very poor like work-life balance. I tend to like work all the time. When I'm on site, I try to devote 85% of my time to the on-site project, and then the 15% where I'm supposed to sleep is usually when I do all the other stuff. But yeah, like, and also people that know me and work with me know that like when I'm on site, and like everyone else kind of gets used to me not responding to emails when they know I'm on site. We have a shared like friends calendar, so you can see like where we are and whether or not we're accessible, and that helps a lot.
I mean, also not the tortured artist version maybe, or like what I'm striving for is that I insist on only working 35 hours a week at my job. And so that means I don't think we're more productive by working 40 or 60 hours necessarily. It's not a one-to-one connection. Sometimes you need to work 60 hours. Sometimes you work more. But I think it's also important to like realize that within the work week, you can only do whatever is accomplishable. And so work hard during those hours, but also like go home and make dinner and invite people over. And those are probably, in a rural place, that's probably the people you're working with, or that's your next project, or you're calling Mary on the video chat to like figure out what just happened that day. So work never ends, but also like it is important to like realize what you can do and not just like kill yourself by the level of stress that you could take on.
Yeah, I feel like that's about owning your time, you know, like when you have to be at a desk job 40 hours a week, or you have to be in your studio class 3 hours of this day and 3 hours of that day, you're like in submission to your time. And I think in order to do what you want to do, you have to be like, this is my time, I'm going to use it. And you get rid of a lot of excuses and take breaks too.
And a good friend of mine, when she does a presentation, she says, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. So realizing that you can do anything, like it's all possible, but you also just like got to draw the line. Like what can I do now? What's important now?
Thank you.
You get to hand that microphone to the person of your choice for a question.
Thank you, Colin, so much. Appreciate that. All the people he could pick on. So fantastic. I loved everything, but I have one thing, particularly because I'm in a pedagogic environment. You guys do all this like participatory, action-based, creative kind of doing, making research. And I think you're still describing, like when you say research, you're talking about things that are more traditional, like the data sort of collection and so on. So I just want to laud that, like that term, you're kind of letting that term maybe get a little narrow, because we've got people out here who's like, do all kinds of design creative research. And you're, you know, just I would say it's, isn't it, I mean, don't you think of it as kind of all one thing? I mean, it's always like making and thinking and creating and kind of figuring out the next thing. I know you have to package it, people want to say, and maybe they don't think artists and designers can give them, oh, here's some analytical information about your housing, and here's put together in a pack. Don't you guys do like, you know, other stuff? So I just wanted, I don't know, maybe you had a follow up on that, but that was something I noted.
I would say that the newspaper every month is research. It's
Yeah.
my research. It's packaged as a newspaper. It's delivered through the mail, but it's research. I could call it just my creative practice. That's true too. But yeah, research is our practice in a lot of ways. And sometimes there's creative output, and sometimes it is just the form. Does that answer your not question?
No, I'm good. I'm good with that.
Okay.
This one might be more for Jack, maybe. I'm curious about some of the housing projects, and I guess my main question is, what do you find are some of the biggest pushbacks or obstacles? Is it codes? Is it people who don't believe in what you're doing? Or what is it? What are some of the biggest things that you have to overcome to make those ideas and those projects a reality?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not codes, because you can just change those or ignore them. I think what I've always had trouble with is, you know, the mayor, him there talking to me, and being my neighbor, and many other people in town when I was on the planning commission, just didn't believe that there was a problem. And it's just because they're comfortable, and because they can pay their heat bill every month, and because issues of the security of your home and that relating to if you're, you know, if you got your shit together. If you like, you know, people don't let you into their home 'cause it's one of the most intimate spaces that exist. And so if you have something going on, like, it was always hard to get into that home. Like, we would go into a home to like fix a water heater. And really the only way we were invited in is because like their aunt got a fix-it project from us. So they're like, the aunt vouched for us, so we were able to go in, and then you just see like a mess. And it's like what's happening in their life expressed in physical form. And so I think it's really hard for people to accept help, but also like it's very hard to talk about that in a larger community context because you don't want to like talk about specific people, and you can't take pictures of that. And like I always have a hard time with it. Aestheticizing poverty is so hard. Like, it's such a fine line. It's not so hard. It's such a fine line. Like even like the pictures that we've seen earlier is like, you know, these like pictures that are like so beautiful, like photographs of people, but in dire need. It's just a weird thing, but that's also kind of like what you're taught you have to do in order to get the money to be able to fix it. And like making sure that they're giving consent for that, and that there's, you know, that they're participating in it. And like, I don't know. I think it's just like people not thinking that there's a problem, because that, you know, that wouldn't happen in my town, and that's not. I've seen my neighbor; they have a nice car. Like I deal with every single person ever. Like they're fine; they have a nice car. Or I just saw them buy a new big screen TV. I don't know. I don't think I answered that very well.
Establishing need is maybe the most difficult part.
Humanizing it.
Yeah, humanizing it without really being able to.
Without exploiting the people
Right.
you're working for.
Yeah, that's the phrase.
Humanizing the issue without exploitation. It's a really hard line to walk, and I think that's why we need to like keep our critical communities close so that we can call each other out when we're not sure about how we're representing the people we work with.
Yeah, so I guess I'll go back to that one. So I made some offhand comment about like firms and only giving 1%. I think it's great. I just think it's really weird when firms do that 1% of their time and then put it on their website and talk about it all the time. Like, see, we care about our community, or we've done this project, or the schools will do it. They'll like have like, oh, we went out and we like talked to these people. And then that's how they attract more people. That's how they attract more students. That's how firms attract more work, is by saying that they've done this community project. When really they just helicoptered in, messed up a bunch of stuff, delivered something from vomit from a studio that no one asked for, no one wanted, and then left and never followed up on it, never checked in on it. It might have made the situation worse. I don't know if you've seen the movie The Gods Must Be Crazy. I don't usually reference movies from before I was born, but a Coke bottle drops out of the sky, and then the whole town is messed up because there's suddenly currency.
I think also along those lines, I'm not talking about the problems anymore, but I would like to just mention like the power of return and returning to communities that you work in and you work with. It's like the reason I was back in St. James a few weeks ago after working there this summer. It like means a lot, and it brings a lot of momentum to the relationships you build when you make sure that you're following through and returning.
I had kind of a quick it's a quick question, but it might be open-ended, it might be a mess, so just bear with. Sleep deprivation. Woo. It seems like there's a disconnection between when you guys talk about your work and when you talk about your clients. Specifically, Jack, for you with architecture and the client that deserves architecture, when you three of you were talking about any artwork that you do, there is no separation between Adidas, the highest client, and the neighborhood that, any project that you do, they get the same level of respect, they get the same level of attention, and in many ways they get a similar product out of it. Whereas you've made now a number of statements, and there seems to be a real chip on your shoulder about the role of architecture and the client that it serves. So whether it's the 1% return, or the you kept calling it aestheticizing poverty, and you guys have made a point of saying that you don't want to label the rural as being this homogenous condition, yet at the same time it is kind of calling out that it is less than in some way, that it doesn't deserve the same effort or the same level of respect, even if that is an aesthetic, as, say, the high-end client. And that's not a judgment, but it is curious that there is that, it's almost like a reflective need to give so much respect to it that you almost can't give it anything that might seem as superficial, like feeling good about it, giving a beautiful image, a portrait, or anything in that sense. So I was wondering if you guys can, if that made any sense whatsoever too, as I was talking. I was like,
Oh, it made sense.
and it's messy. That part I assume.
I think part of it is like these ideas around othering them, the homeless community, the rural community. Yeah, we're super fucking sensitive about how we represent the populations we're working with. Yeah, am I less sensitive about talking about Adidas client? Sure. Do I think it was fucking stupid they wanted to pop up makeup at a female empowerment? Yeah. Am I gonna shit on the girls that are going there that maybe wanna have makeup put on or wanna put their statement on the wall? No, I'm not going to. You have to understand who has been given power, where the imbalances are, and try to correct it as best you can. Does anyone do it right all the time? No, of course not. Can you try to surround yourself with people that are? Yeah. And I think us and them, it gets really tricky. I mean, that's why I mean, that's like why I'm making my paper. The newspaper is my way of being like, we're all the fucking same. You can look however you look, you know? You can have whatever you have, but we all show up and die the same way, so.
Ready now?
Sort of. I mean, it's also interesting because both of you have referred to living on the road and living in a van, and you actually explicitly stated that you were homeless for a period, but you didn't see it as less than. You didn't see it as almost, it was a reality of the condition, but it didn't stop you in any way. So I don't have an answer for this or even really a judgment. It was just kind of a thought of, you guys are so, when it comes to the products, you guys are so unabashed about the aesthetic of it, except when it comes to the community that it serves. And then there is that switch of an uber level of respect. And I don't know if that, it's kind of this thing of like going almost too far in terms of respect that they're not given, by calling out the fact that they're disenfranchised. Is the rejection of that becoming kind of a fetishization of it in the first place? Does that make sense, or more sense, or less sense?
It still makes sense to me.
Okay.
Got more sense.
I don't think I need to go on. We can chat more in private later.
I had something, I just forgot it. What was it? Oh, yeah, I guess the last thing I would say that a lot of it is about protecting the places we work for. And like by working intimately and earnestly in communities, we also have a duty to like protect them from the industries that exploit. So I think that's part of the withholding as well.
As I would hope they would protect me.
Yeah, I definitely think it goes both ways. Yeah.
Making sure I get paid, making sure I have a place to shower, you know. I mean, the glorification of helping people, it's really hot to be socially equitable now. That's part of probably the success of Blue Sky Center, is that people in LA want to feel like they're connected to stuff that's helping other people, and brands look really good to female empower. You know, like I get hired as the token female art director because they're like, we have a woman's thing, we should hire a woman. And so you can use that to your advantage. I certainly do. It's a way that my voice is getting heard in a way that it wasn't 3 years ago. But yeah, it's tricky. I mean, I think we just don't want to be on the side of history that was like, yeah, it was really hot to like help people. It looked really good. It was really a great movement when brands were invested in helping people,
Or yeah, like it's the same as like, yeah, an architecture firm putting one project of 100 projects as like what they're about. Well, that's not what you're about, and we all have to call each other out on it.
You got a question?
Yeah.
Because the love element, I just wanted to throw that in there too. Like, you don't have to love your client, but when you do, the work changes. And it means that you're more invested and you have more, yeah, maybe you're a little bit more sensitive about it, more protective about it. If you don't want to love your client, don't do that. But if you want to love the people that you work with, that you work with, it's a long-term relationship, and it's like, yeah, it can be messier, and yeah, just kind of a good love factor.
Thank you, Ashley.
All right, so this might be a good question to open up to the whole room, but I've been researching this state interdisciplinary, working on something that involves interdisciplinary curriculum. Kind of found there's two different models. There's the jack of all trades, master of none interdisciplinary, and then there's kind of a discipline, but yet so it's kind of interdisciplinary by committee. What do you guys go across your experience and what you think works better? Or which is
I don't think you ever have to stop learning. Yeah. I think I'm an amateur at lots of things. I'm also like an expert at other things. Like ask me about the post office sometime. Yeah. I'll talk for hours. I'm also really good at astrology. It's great at parties. But I don't think you ever have to stop. I think you can continue learning, and if the learning is informing your work, then you're going to get really good at the things that are working for you. Which is why I get to call myself an artist, because nobody knows what that means.
Something Mary and I have talked about before is that we just let people call us whatever they think that we are, and that's easier because it lets them and I'm not offended by it. And I think you can use that to your advantage of like when you're applying for something like, oh, we have our artist, we have our planner, like we have whatever, but like we all know the reality of like us working together is that like I wasn't the only one working on the barn, right? Like Spence and us, we were all there doing the same like level and like quality of work and depth of work. And I was better at something and Mary is better at something, Corbin's better at something, but it's not like, that's why I was frustrated earlier about like, I'm the design builder, I'm the designer, I'm the one that goes to this research, like that, everyone should be doing all of it, at least like observing it, like Mary's like example of like, Kelly and I read the housing plan, but she was asking the questions and wanted to know everything about it, just in her language.
Yeah, I think titles are only as useful as you decide that they are. It used to be really useful for me to identify as a designer because I needed people to hire me as a designer. I wanted bigger projects, so it became really important for me to call myself a creative director so that I would get hired to be a creative director. Now I make a newspaper and all my clients know me for the most part or get referred to me. So I don't have to call myself anything. I call myself an artist because usually that's confusing enough for people to get me in the door to ask the questions I want to ask. But you get to say whatever you want, and in a college sense, maybe it's useful in academia or institutions, so you can decide which side of the room to sit on, but I don't know. You get to use language however it works best for you. You can redefine your authority.
I just change it. I mean, I had a version of a slide that had just like titles that I've had, and just like, oh, just like she's saying, she's like changing it through it. But like when it doesn't work anymore, like
change your name.
Social practice or whatever it's called today. It's just every year there's a new name for it, just so you can be like at the top. And so on grants, like creative placemaking is a thing because we fund creative placemaking. So you say, I do creative placemaking. Right. And then next year they'll be like, creative placemaking is old. We do, robot manufacturing. Like I do robot manufacturing.
That's funny, I do that. Yeah, okay.
just bullshit your way through it. I don't know. That's the best tips.
If you know what you want to do, you just come up with ways to do it.
And if you need to look official, wear a jumpsuit.
And a name tag.
A lot of the time. Name tag, clipboard, jumpsuit, you're set.
So we are going to go to open format networking, so everybody can keep asking questions directly. And then we are going to come back and we have the architecture thing. So just want to give your your clearing of the air for our home boat, please. So, 15-minute networking break. And we'll be back
About to leave, already packing. Come with me, I'm not really asking. We'll get away to a place where we don't know. About to see